Is that right?
Space Between is the brand new album from the supergroup The Circle, featuring Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, Vic Johnson and Jason Bonham, and is available through BMG Music, featuring 10 tracks, available through streaming services and also physical copies. Formed all the way back in 2014, The Circle was definitely one of those supergroups that caught my attention via YouTube, and I managed to check out some of the footage of these guys hitting the venue and ripping through some classic hard rock material from Montrose, Van Halen, some of Sammy Hagar's solo material, and also Led Zeppelin as well. Now, given the lineup of this supergroup, it was always going to be one of those things where these guys were going to absolutely kill it with some of this material. But the question is, now that we have some original material from these guys finally, are they just a glorified covers act, or can they actually deliver some quality original material? And I gotta say, checking out The Space Between, this album was definitely not without its surprises. Originally this band was billed as The Circle, but if you have a look closely at the cover of this album, you'll notice that Sammy Hagar actually has top billing, which has been kind of thinking in the outset coming into this album that it was just going to be another solo record from Sammy. And his talk about this possibly being his last album that he's going to make, and his reflection as a lyricist, given the subject matter of some of the lyrics in some of these songs, would have you thinking that this is possibly a swan song or a swan album in many ways. But listening really closely to this album, it does feel very much like a band that really just enjoy playing together with one another. In many ways, this is an album of two halves here, and what we're listening to is an album which really taps into a lot of blues and roots inspired sound with a slight rock tinge as well, and it's really showcased more on the first half of the album more than the second half on tracks like Devil Came Down to Philly, Full Circle Jam, and also Can't Hang. And as some of the names would suggest on this album, there is a really cool improvisational loose feel to some of this material here, where it almost creates the impression that the mics are rolling, the band just plugged in their instruments and they're ripping through these songs for the very first time. And there is a really, really cool spark to some of the earlier songs on this album. Can't Hang was one of the first tracks I checked out of this album when it dropped on YouTube some weeks ago, and I feel this track could have easily made its way onto some of Sammy's solo work. It features a middle of the road tempo and some great backing vocals from Michael Anthony. Free Man taps into Vic Johnson's rock sensibilities as a guitarist and features some great down-tuned riffage here. I actually really enjoyed the opening riff for this one. There's some great lead guitar here as well, and Bonham's straight-ahead rock groove would definitely make his dad proud on this track. It's a fantastic track and definitely a highlight of the album. Now, the second half of the album kind of gets away from more of the blues and roots inspired sound that was featured heavily on the first half, and really is more of a throwback to classic 80s hard rock in terms of its production, performance, and also its use of reverb and also synths, which are really associated with that period. Trust Fund Baby has a Black Dog, Led Zeppelin-esque type of opening riff and is one of the few up-tempo tracks on this album. Definitely one of the album's highlights, particularly if you're looking for a callback to some of the 70s and 80s hard rock sound that's really associated with these guys in this group. Now look, the performances on this album are great, okay? It's one of those things, if you've got Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, Vic Johnson and Jason Bonham in one band together, you're not going to get a bad sound, okay? These guys have been in the industry for some time now and they've really honed their craft, and it really showcases a band here that really enjoy playing together. I think that's one of the most important things about this record. Vic Johnson shows that he is quite the versatile player, being able to emulate a lot of Eddie Van Halen's guitar lines on some of Van Halen's material live, as we've already seen from him. And on this album he does really tap into a lot of that great rock guitar playing, and we do get some great lead guitar playing from him, but he also showcases a lot of great slide playing on tracks like Can't Hang, and he also taps into a softer side on some of this material as well. Jason Bonham is another versatile musician in this group, and over the years, look, we've seen him being able to perform Led Zeppelin classics very well live, and he can emulate a lot of his dad's part and really pay homage to his dad. But I think in many ways he is definitely his own drummer, and this album really showcases that in many ways. He never breaks the groove or the integrity of the song by trying to jam an overcomplicated fill into it. And look, the legendary Michael Anthony works best when he's not giving us bass solos. His bass playing here is mostly simple, pretty straightforward, and that really allows the lead instruments in this band to breathe a whole lot more, which is great. I think it works really well for these songs. While his work with Alex Van Halen is undoubtedly iconic, and his work with Chad Smith in Chickenfoot was great, I believe in many ways Jason Bonham is the first drummer that he really truly gels with. I've also felt that he never gets enough kudos as a backing vocalist, and to me his backing vocals are absolutely sublime, and here once again on this album he really shows how well his voice complements with Sammy Hagar. And Sammy's still looking and sounding much younger than his 70 plus years at this point. I believe he's 71, turning 72 this year. Let me know in the comments if I've got his age correct, but man, the guy is still sounding fantastic. He still has his high register as well, and it's not really showcased on this album. He can still perform a lot of the Van Halen material live, as evidenced if you go on YouTube and check out any footage of The Circle. He really still has his high register. It would have been cool to hear a little bit more of that on this album. But aside from that, this is a really solid vocal performance from Sammy, and there's some great lyrics on this album that deal with themes of greed. Some of these songs don't really land here, guys, like Bottom Line, for example, and it almost sounds like a band scraping to the bottom of the barrel to create a great track. It's one of those songs, I don't know what it's doing on there. It really is the definition of filler track in my opinion. Some of these songs also are around the 2 minute, 3 minute song length, and while it can be great for some people who want something a little bit tighter, don't really have the attention span for longer song lengths, I feel that in many ways some of these songs are starting to get interesting and they hit that fade out mark and you're kind of left thinking, man, I actually want that track to go for a bit longer as it's starting to get interesting. So at points on this album, I did feel like I wanted a little bit more. Now, if this is Sammy's Swan album, I think this is a pretty solid album to go out on, and I think after a successful career, he's definitely lived up to finishing what he started. I'm going to give Space Between a B. So guys, what are your thoughts on Space Between? Let me know in the comments below what you thought, and while you're there, also let me know what your favorite Van Hagar album is of all time. Mine's 5150. Until next time guys, don't forget, support the artist, buy the music. Rock on.